My name is Jill Coil, and welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we talk the nitty, gritty, shitty aspects of divorce and help each other come through this not only surviving, but thriving. I'm a divorce attorney, and I'm interviewing other experts and people just like you who are going through or have been through a divorce, so you can have the latest and greatest information on all things before, during, and after divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome to No One Dies from Divorce with your host, me, Jill Coil. We love to talk to leading experts in a variety of fields to explore the roadmap of divorce and how individuals can not only survive, but thrive after their divorce. This goes right along with my book, and we're so excited for you to be here listening to us. I'm actually really excited for our guest today, not only because he's a really cool dude, but he's also one of my good friends. So Marco, this is Marco Brown. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jill. It's been a while.
I know.
COVID kind of shot our ability to go out to lunch and see
I
each other.
know. We so Marco and I have been friends for over 10 years, and our careers actually align very closely. I was thinking about this when I knew you were coming on. We graduated school about the same time. Did you graduate in 07?
07.
Yeah. So we graduated the same time. And Marco and I have kind of the same story about law school and where our kind of past took us and why we went to the law school we went to, but we don't need to get into that. But we also then, after law school, kind of worked our way up. We worked in the big firms, billing the large billable hours, and we recognized that this kind of work-life balance was just not going to be something we wanted to do for the rest of our life.
It was terrible.
Right. And I think me and Marco actually also work. I don't want to call us dreamers because that sounds like something like, oh, I have this dream. No, I think we just work really hard, and we make really lofty goals because we believe in ourselves. And because of that, Marco actually kind of went out on his own in 2010 and started his law firm, Brown Law. And I remember meeting you about the same time when you started your law firm. And he started this firm with no money, no clients, and no network. You had just moved here from Albuquerque, is that correct?
New Mexico is Farmington.
Oh, Farmington, New Mexico.
In New Mexico, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, and so he worked the law firm during the day, and then you worked an $8 per hour job at nights and weekends to pay the rent for you and your family.
I did.
Oh my gosh. And through those, 11 years, Marco, you own one of the largest family law firms in the state, which you've built into a multi-million-dollar company. You're in Salt Lake, and now you're expanding and going down to Arizona. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we're working on that right now, but we'll be in Phoenix by the end of the year is the goal.
That's amazing. And, you started with nothing. You started with no network, and then he worked himself up in just 5 short years of in the Utah community. You got voted Utah Family Lawyer of the Year, which is a pretty big deal in our community because it's only one award per year, and it goes to some pretty cool and awesome people in our community. But this is my personal favorite that I think you should claim to fame is that you are now basically the divorce TikTok king.
Well, here in Utah, there are people that have more than I do outside of Utah.
Well, I think it's pretty cool. So your TikTok name is what? Divorce attorney?
Yeah, divorce attorney.
Amazing. And you have quite the following. So he started on TikTok. You have over 100,000 followers on the app, and you have almost 800,000 likes on your videos. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about what made you decide to go from like this amazing business entrepreneur mind and to get on TikTok.
I'm just going to state that I'm horrible at TikTok in the sense that like people get on TikTok and they're usually 16-year-old girls and they dance around, right? I don't do any of that sort of stuff. I'm like the whitest guy you've ever met, so I don't dance. But I just get on there and I just talk about divorce. I make jokes about it. I answer questions about it. I just decided to do that, and it's resonated with a lot of people, evidently. They get on, they listen to it. I have a lot of people that aren't married, or they're not going to get married, but they think it's just interesting to listen to how it works anyway. So I get a lot of those people. I'll get a lot of people that hate me on either side. So they're kind of men go their own way, I think there's some acronym, but that's a group. And then there's like hardcore feminists, and they all hate me for answering fairly normal questions about how things work. But, it's an interesting ecosystem, and I really enjoy it. The vast majority of people are very, very nice on there, and I get to answer a whole bunch of questions for people that I would never otherwise interact with.
I think it's amazing. And, it's interesting as an entrepreneur myself and building up my business, recognizing how big social media is. And, when people say you have to be on TikTok, if you want to be relevant, you have to be on TikTok. And I'm like, I'm the same as you. Like, I don't want to dance on TikTok. Like, I'm pretty serious, and, I want people to take me seriously. And so, but when you look at your reach and how you're actually helping people on it, I can actually see how it is something that's important, because that's where a lot of people are. And maybe they wouldn't have found you otherwise. And so I think it's really great that you decided to kind of put yourself out there, show your true and vulnerable self, which we talk a lot about in my book. But I think that's
my true and vulnerable self would be dancing. And that's never going to happen.
I don't know, Marco. If you get enough people that challenge you to do it, you never know. You never know.
I'm going to go see one of my friends from TikTok. Her name is Kelly Chang, and she's a divorce attorney in LA. She was an actress, and she dances and does that and has a lot more followers than I do. But I'm going to go out there in May and kind of see her and then go around LA a little bit. So she said, well, we have to do a TikTok together. And I said, that's fine. I'm not dancing.
Come on, Marco.
So she's going to find something else for us to do.
Marco, that will be the TikTok that gets you 2 million views, because it's something you're not. It is pulling yourself out of your comfort zone and doing something that brings a lot of joy to people. So I'm going to challenge you here today on my podcast that you should just do it.
I'll think about it.
Okay. When I was thinking, oh, Marco's going to be on my show, I'm so excited. What should we talk about? I thought that this topic, which is highly Googled, is one of the most Googled phrases in when you're thinking or talking about going through divorce. And the Googled phrase is, what does the Bible say about divorce? And so when we think about that, why do you think that that's such an important subject, or something that so many people Google?
I think because people tend to care, right? So we're still a kind of majority Christian nation, and a lot of people don't particularly live that. But when you go through big changes in your life and you're unsure about something, you tend to go back to your faith to see what your scriptures or what your faith has to say about something. At least that's kind of what I'm imagining here. So I don't think Google's really a good place for it, but. But hopefully people get Google, and then they go read their actual scripture and see what the scripture says.
But that's the thing, is that nobody has time to read the scripture. Google is the shortcut of my life. It gives me all things information.
See,
no,
that's not okay.
Okay, that's not okay.
It's like a reference guide, right?
Yeah,
and then you
it is.
Read the actual text.
But that's the best part about it, is it can give you a shortcut to kind of then know where to go and find the information. So you don't have to spend hours thinking about this. But when I was thinking about this, Marco and I are licensed in Utah. And so we and both of our very large family law firms are based out of Utah. And so we understand a little bit about the, I guess, sanctity between marriage and divorce, because we are in such a high Christian faith-based state. And majority of that would be the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or some people call them Mormons. And so we are dealing with this question, I believe, a lot in our personal experiences with our clients. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I have clients that really think about this a lot, and there's a lot of anguish in them because of this. Some just kind of discount it, and they don't really think about it. But there tends to be a lot of anguish. What's interesting in this, talking about this subject for me personally, is that I've never actually thought about it that much. So this is another way I read scripture, right? When I read scripture, I read it for the kind of behavioral traits so I don't get divorced, right? That's kind of how I end up reading it. But I almost never have thought about it as, what does the Bible actually say about divorce itself and the reasons for it, and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. So this is kind of interesting for me too.
Right. And that was exactly my thing too, is that when I'm telling my clients, when they're coming to me and they're like, oh, I stayed in the marriage 10 years longer because my faith told me I should. You know, a lot of times my statement to that was, well, God doesn't want you to be unhappy, or, you know, this is, you know, you've tried and, you know, you're going to be okay, which is a lot of my book. You know, no one dies from divorce. Like, I don't believe anybody should be miserable or be in abusive or horrible relationships for any purpose. But when we are actually talking about what does the Bible say about divorce, I absolutely found this to be fascinating. And I agree with you. It's not something that I would like pull out my scripture and say, well, the Bible actually gives you permission to get divorced in these circumstances. And now, after doing this research and what we're going to talk about today, I could if I wanted to.
You could. I never do that sort of thing because
Right.
I'm there as a lawyer to help people based on
Right.
the decision they make, not to kind of talk them in or talk them out. I actually do try to talk people out of it sometimes when they're unsure. I'm like, you need to go talk to a therapist or whatnot. But I never want to use religion as kind of a sales thing or anything like that. So
Right.
you know, I'm just there to help people in for whatever decision they made, and then try to minimize the pain.
Right. Right. And that's not our job. And by the time they meet with us, usually they've gone through this process
Yeah.
of thinking, okay, enough's enough.
Yep, exactly.
So it's usually too late for us to be the ones to say, you probably should rethink this. But if you read my book, in my first chapter, I do go through a lot of questions that you should be asking yourself. And if you're not quite at the point of thinking divorce is here, it needs to happen, these are really good questions to ask yourself to kind of recheck what's going on in your relationship and maybe do a pivot to improve it and maybe save it. So I absolutely think that that's important. So let's talk about it. What does the Bible say about divorce? So what I found this article on Google, and it led me to some really good scriptures to talk about it. And so the article was called Myth 18, Divorce is the Unpardonable Sin and God Hates Divorce, by G. Bakersville. And so I found some really good, interesting things. He had made it, broken it down really good to 3 Christian views of divorce. And so there are reasons in the biblical view why divorce is okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So let's talk about that. So one of the reasons would be adultery and sexual immorality. What's your thoughts on that?
So I think that one is pretty, well, if we take this, the breakdown that he has, there's the biblical view, which takes the Old and the New Testament, then the New Testament only view, which that's kind of a misnomer because you don't have a New Testament view without an Old Testament view, but whatever. If you just take the scriptures from the New Testament, and then what he calls the permanence view, and the permanence view is that there is no acceptable reason for divorce. I think that one is exceedingly unbiblical. Like, you have to just like excise a bunch of the Bible to get to the permanence view. But when it comes to the New Testament view, this is the kind of exemplar from Jesus in Matthew 19, I think it's 3 through 12, where he talks about setting aside a woman for adultery. If you do it for that, then you divorce her for that, then you're fine. If you do it for something other than that, or that's one way of interpreting what Jesus is saying, then you're committing adultery if you go take another wife, right? So that one is, I think, very, very clear that adultery or sexual immorality is completely fine as a reason for divorce.
Right. And how many times have you been in a consultation where they said, oh, my spouse had an affair 10 years ago and I chose to stay. And lo and behold, that person had another affair.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
And a lot of times they talk about it goes back to their spiritual and religious roots that really made them think that they can work through that. And I want to be clear. Not every affair needs to reduce to divorce. Would you agree?
No, absolutely. I think if you're a forgiving human being, you're very likely to forgive one. Forgiving two, I'm not entirely sure
Shame
about
on
that.
you kind of thing.
But yeah.
Yeah.
One.
Well, and the other thing is with the adultery is that it's not necessarily about you. It's not about you. In fact, it's all about what that person is lacking and what led them to have those insecurities that led to the affair. So So that's one of those things that, when you look at the list of things that are the unforgivable sin, or the thing that you think is like the line in the sand, adultery is actually probably the one that you could work through, because it's really about that person needing to step up. John Gottman says it perfectly when he says that if somebody has an affair but then can't recognize their part in it and apologize for it, then that's when you would want to leave. And so when you look at like the scriptures and what it specifically says about sexual immorality, Matthew 19:9 says, "And I say to you, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery." And note that Jesus does not say that this is the only reason for divorce. We find other reasons for divorce in Scripture. And so I think that that's really an interesting, because another reason that is physical neglect and abuse.
Yeah, that is. I did want to say something about 19:9 for a second. So
Please.
This is interesting to me. You can take, as I understand kind of the Catholic view on this, is they take this very, very literally. Unless your spouse has committed sexual impropriety and adultery in this manner, then you can't get divorced, right? I'm not that entirely sure that's what Jesus is saying here. So back in his day, there were two kind of big schools among the rabbis. There was the Hillel school and the Shammai school. And I'm really kind of condensing this down, and I'm not Jewish, so I'm not like super great with this. But my understanding was Hillel was essentially, you can divorce your spouse for anything, right? And Jesus talks about this. You don't even need to give your spouse kind of a writ of divorce. And Moses required a writ of divorce, right? They actually had to give her a piece of paper. But they didn't require it in the Hillel school. You could just divorce your wife for anything, including like the meat being burned, I think is one of the examples that Jesus used. So, or being oversalted, sorry. So I think he's reacting to that Hillel school. And then the Shammai school was very, very strict about it. So Jesus seems to be a little bit more on that side than on the Hillel school. But he really talks about this as like, this is the purpose of divorce, right?
Right.
And it's just to bring two people together. This is what God did with Adam and Eve, and they made one. And then, man is putting this asunder, so it's taking it apart, and then we don't want that. So he uses it as this opportunity to give kind of this exegesis on kind of the deeper meaning of Scripture. And I think we need to keep that in mind as well. But I'm not entirely sure he was being completely literal, like this is the only reason. I think it was more Hillel school, you just say that they can do it for anything. And I think he's probably reacting to that and saying, no, only do it for the really, really important stuff, not just for the kind of I fell out of love or you salted the meat or so, whatever it was, right? Like, don't be a dork on that side. Like, really, if you're going to do this, it needs to be for something that's very, very serious.
Right. And I think if you look at the history of the words "till death do us part," I was interested in this phrase because this is something that people regularly say in their wedding ceremonies. And, I think that a lot of people came down. Well, first of all, it started, hundreds of years ago, but it was after the Bible had been created and some of these statements had been said by these apostles, and it was more of an Anglican view of marriage, like a sanctity. And so it was just a promise that you would be, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, until death do us part. And I think what that did at that time was then it like shifted this thought that meant that what the scriptures were saying is that you stayed married no matter what.
I think that those vows came from the Book of Common Prayer, if I remember that correctly. I think that might be Winthrop, but that came over very early on. I think that might have been actually the first book printed in America. If I might be totally mistaken about that, but I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and it's just interesting because it changed the thinking a little bit to think that you stayed in marriage no matter what. But from studying the scriptures today and talking about this with you, that's not clearly the intent. And it's sad too, because I think as a divorce attorney, I've seen a lot of people that have come and stayed in such abusive situations, whether it was emotional, financial, physical, because of this innate belief that, in sickness and in health, whether he's beating the crap out of you or not, like you kind of put your head down and you work at it, and that's just not what the scriptures say.
Yeah, no, it's not. I never fault people though for staying in marriages. I tell people that if they're getting physically, sexually abused, like absolutely, like you have to get out. My mom got out of her first marriage because of that. She's being physically abused, and I always admired her for that. So I just tell people, look, it's extraordinarily likely to continue, and please just get out. Right? I don't see any problem with that, ethically for myself at all. So I never really fault people for staying in their marriage and trying to make it work. Because there's actually some pretty good sociological data that when people stay in marriages that aren't like horribly abusive, and they get to they think about divorce and they get to 5 years down the road, the vast majority of those people who stayed in the marriages are way, way happier. And they're happier than the people that got divorced and then got out, right? So the grass is not always greener. So I never fault people for trying to make their marriage work.
Right. Especially, I guess, but what I'm hearing you say is physical and physical neglect and physical abuse is never okay.
No, absolutely get out. Absolutely.
And I think in our practice, I've seen more financial abuse than probably any other abuse. And a lot of people are like, well, I didn't recognize that him, I use him or her were controlling the finances to the point that I had no control. I had no trust. That is abuse. Emotional neglect and abuse and abandonment by an unbeliever are all biblical views and a number of acceptable reasons for divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that under the law of Moses, this is pretty standard stuff. That if your husband, because men held the money back then, like if your husband didn't give you the money, it was necessary for you and your kids. That was absolutely a fine reason to leave, right? Like there's no problem with that. Nowadays, it's a little. I know what you're saying about the controlling, the money controlling and whatnot. I look at it. I certainly get a lot of that, and that's mostly men who do that. I've seen a lot of women do it as well. The interesting thing to me is how many people come in and they don't know their money, not because their spouse is controlling over the money. It's just that they've never taken the time to actually know it. So I always tell people, hey, look, you got to get a handle on your money. If you're not, and this is actually one of my really big red flags in marriage, that if you're not on the same page with money, and if you're not working together with money, you're much more likely to get divorced because you're just not on that page. You're definitely not being one if you don't even know what your money is doing and you just put that all on your spouse. That's unfair to your spouse, right? And that's kind of that reverse control. You just kind of make your spouse do everything. But it just a piece of advice, like just be on the same page. Like get together, budget together, and know your money.
So when you write a list of all the things that I see in common in a divorce, a lot of people, that's probably the number one question I get asked is like, what causes divorce? And in my experience, separate finances is the number one commonality I see in the divorces. And again, it goes right back to what you were saying. It's like it might not be intentional on some cases. It might be I just didn't want to take care of it, and therefore I just didn't do anything with it. But it is the thing that I see the most. And so when I'm thinking about, well, what causes divorces and what could cause you not to get divorced, that's the first thing I say is that you should have mutual understanding of your finances. You should sit down and do a budget meeting every month. I know you and your wife do that.
Yeah.
And and even if you have to have separate bank accounts for some reason, whether, your ex-spouse has judgments or bankruptcy, and so you don't want to blend them that way, but you should be sitting down and basically checking each other and just an understanding of your finances. And I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that you are tracking every penny that somebody's spending, because that's another reason why people get divorced. Don't tell me I can't, buy my Diet Coke at Maverick or something, but really just understanding where your money goes. And then it also allows you guys to sit down and create goals together. Hey, what do you want to do with this money? What money do you want to put away for charitable causes, and what charitable causes do you want to, participate in? Like, it really opens a conversation of being able to have like future conversations with your spouse, which I think is sometimes what we forget to do in marriage because we get in a rut and then we stop looking forward. We literally are just trying to like handle the day to day, and it causes us to kind of lose the flame. We don't get excited about things anymore because we're not planning our future together.
Yeah, you're just, like you said, you're just doing the day to day, right? And that's okay. That'll keep you alive, but that doesn't really self-actualize you, right?
Right.
That doesn't get you to that next step.
Right.
It doesn't get you to the next step of what you want to do as a couple. Like you pay the mortgage, okay, that's great. You pay the water, but no one lives to pay the water bill or pay the mortgage.
Right.
Like you live to become wealthy. You live to be able to give money to your kids and your grandkids and your great grandkids. You live to be able to give money to other people to help them through their lives as well, to have fun with money. And if you don't sit down and you're not super intentional about that, and you don't have those conversations, you're just going to live the day to day, and it's just going to be mundane.
Right. I listen to Clubhouse a lot, and I listened to a room last night about entrepreneurship and just like how to like put your intent out there. And one of the things that this girl said, I thought of you and I have to share this here, is she says, I love money and money loves me. And I think of you because obviously your intent has always been able to create a lot of wealth. But just like you said, not for yourself, or purposely so that you can make sure your kids' futures, futures are taken care of. I think that's really great. And so, but you and your wife align in those goals. I know that you guys have conversations about that, and what maybe she doesn't like Dave Ramsey as much as you do, but she at least participates in it.
Yeah, no one likes Dave Ramsey as much as I do. No, she does. So we are on the same page. I was a little more the driver on that, but that's because back in 2015 we had, I think, almost $500,000 in debt. It was just killing me, like literally killing me. It was awful. So I went to her one day and said, "Hey, we gotta do something about this, and this is the plan that I want to do." And she was great about it. She's always trusted me for some reason. So we've been on that path ever since.
That's good. And I think it's helped you guys be able to commonly get to your goals. And you guys see that together, and it gets you excited. I know that's how Ryan and I see it. We do it a little bit differently than you. But we love to sit down and have those conversations about what excites us to help, and where do we want to donate causes through our charitable foundation and everything. So it really, and it's such a makeshift, because even if you don't make a lot of money, those conversations are still vital, because even if you're saving, a little bit a month or chipping off at your debt, it's so important, and it's, I guess, satisfying. You really get a lot of satisfaction by knowing, you're working together on a common goal.
Yeah, and if you don't have those conversations, you're never going to have a lot of money.
Right.
Just the way it is.
Right. Or you're always going to feel resentment to your spouse because of what they are or are not doing regarding your goals.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the conversation then about the law of Moses. And you brought this out because the law of Moses allowed divorce and actually commanded divorce for breaking any of the 3 marriage vows. And this is in Exodus 21:10. So food, clothing, and marital rights, which in this verse can be defined as love. So the specific one is, the verse specifically says, if he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish the first wife's food, her clothing, or her marital rights. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. I actually wanted to talk about this scripture because I thought it was very, very interesting and can be tied into a lot of what we do today with Utah law regarding the shift of income.
Yeah.
So in Utah, the whole purpose in divorce, it's an equitable state, but we do a shift of income. So we believe that both parties should be able to live some semblance inside the marriage, outside the marriage. And so when we do the shift of income, it comes through child support and alimony. And it allows both parties to live some semblance of the standard of living of the marriage. And so when I read this, I was like, even the law of Moses kind of commanded that. And I was like, oh, maybe if we went back to the history of why Utah, adopted these laws, maybe we'd find more of a religious context behind it. I actually believe that that probably is true based on the fact we're such a religious, heavily political state. But anyways, so what's your thoughts on that?
When I look at this, it's essentially, yes, if your spouse isn't doing these things, then you have the right to divorce. And specifically, this is talking about having more than one wife, right?
Right.
So that was evidently legal at that point. So if a man took another wife, you couldn't like divest your first wife or your first kids of any of their legal rights, their legal or religious rights. And then it seems at some point you were able to do those sorts of things, and you could like essentially sell your wife and your kids into slavery or somebody else, or indentured servitude. But it says you can't do that. So when it talks about in the very end, one sec. Oh, when it talks about without payment of money, what I kind of wonder about that. And then there's another scripture in Deuteronomy 24 that talks about this. And essentially, the without payment of money is the idea that, again, you can't sell the person for money. Is really kind of what it's saying. So when you look at it like that, it's definitely different than the way we think about things now because we have a completely different legal system. But that was probably pretty radical back in that day and time that you were not allowed to do that sort of thing, that your wife and your children had to maintain all of their legal rights and all of their religious rights, no matter what you, as the husband, chose to do to them, whether or not you chose to honor your marriage vows or not, then you were still on the hook for those people.
Right. And that's why I liken it to today, because we get so many people that are like, I don't want to pay alimony. Why should, if a divorce should be an absolute, and therefore I don't have to I've never had a person come and say, I don't want to pay child support. Well, I guess maybe there's the few.
Oh, I've had some of those.
Yeah. But for the most part, it's like, in the divorce, it should just be something that should be cut off. And I kind of thought that this was an interesting take on that because, it specifically says that just because you have a divorce doesn't mean you can just cut it off, sell, and that you are responsible for, this person or the children, your children. And so I thought that was really interesting. And when you compare it to some of these other states that are more community property, like Texas, I'm licensed in Texas, where there is really no alimony. They've changed that in the last 10 years since I went to law school because they realized how sad it was.
Now it's 3 years is kind of the cap? Or
Yeah, well, you have to be married at least 10 years to qualify for it. You get
okay.
1 year per 10 years or something like that. It's not great, but it's at least a start. And you can get temporary alimony now, which at least gets you through a divorce and kind of gets you to where you can get on your feet.
I know that in Indiana there's a presumption of no alimony at all.
Right.
I think unless you're physically or mentally disabled or something like that, which seems really bad to me.
Well, and even New York, I was having a nice conversation with a New York attorney, and she was telling me that even there, it's become this standard where you only get it for a little bit, and you really have to kind of get on your feet. And so it's just been really, really hard on, primarily women who have stayed at home and been primary breadwinner or primary caretakers of their children. And so I'm not quite sure what is the best way. I think that alimony would be better served if it was for a short period of time, really as a rehabilitative state, to really help somebody get on their feet. In Utah, you can get up to the length of the marriage. So you see some of these long-term marriages and, you have some person that's ordered, 15, 20 years of alimony and they're going to be 74. I don't necessarily think that's right.
I tend to think that, and this is getting off topic just a little bit, but this is more kind of us talking as attorneys. I think the way we do it in Utah, it is rehabilitative for the most part. Like the way the numbers kind of end up in the end, if you have a 10 or 15-year marriage, you're probably getting alimony for 6 years to 7 years, right? And that kind of is a rehabilitative period. Just the way the numbers have worked out and the way we actually agree to things in mediation, I think that's kind of the way it's gone over time.
Unfortunately, though, it's the statute says may up to the length of the marriage. And because of that, you run the risk in trial or of getting it for the length of the marriage. And we just had a trial a few months ago where it was the length of the marriage. And so you have to kind of, weigh your risks when you're going to trial, I guess.
Yeah.
But with that, when you're thinking about like divorce and how hard it is, I think one of the things that you have to recognize is that you should never be fully dependent on your spouse anyways. And if you're at this place where you're fully dependent financially, you have a lot of debt together, you haven't progressed yourself, you haven't done what you need to do to find fulfillment, to find happiness, you are going to be stuck whether you're in a marriage or you choose to jump out of a marriage. And so I always say at this point, like, this is the time, like, where are you? Are you happy in your own situation, minus your spouse? And if you can't truly say no, you say, no, I'm not. This is the time to start looking inward and really determine what can benefit or what can make me happy. What will make me happy? Because a marriage is only going to elevate that. Your spouse or your partner is only going to elevate happiness. It actually won't bring you happiness. So just kind of some final thoughts, like what are some things that you feel, or what do you coach your clients to really help them understand, you're going to be okay. You can land on your feet.
So I think you and I take a slightly different view on this. I'm a little more pessimistic about it, which I don't mean that to be like super pejorative, but I'm slightly more pessimistic just when I look at the data. The people that get divorced, they realize on the other end many, many times that the grass is not greener, right? Now, again, if you're getting divorced because you're being abused or psychologically abused or physically abused, the grass is going to be greener. There's just no doubt about that. If you come into my office and say, I've fallen out of love with a person and it's been 7 years and I just want out and I want to go start something with somebody else, like, that grass ain't any greener, man.
Right.
All right. And so I think, in that sense, I'm slightly more pessimistic. So when I get situations like that, I'm not really telling somebody that, that they're going to be better off. I'm just helping them through a problem. If it's a situation where they really, really need help because of abuse, because of what's gone on, then I will try to say, hey, look, here are some basic things. Like, 1, get out. 2, get your money right. Like, pay off all your debt. Don't have that kind of stress in your life. Then, focus on your kids, really try to make this relationship with your ex the best and least, the most amicable that you possibly can with the least amount of fighting, because that's really going to benefit your children and that's going to decrease a lot of stress on you as well as help them psychologically. Mm-hmm. So, those are some basic things. And then the other thing I tell them is, hey, look, whatever's in your head that caused you to pick this person that you now see was absolutely and totally wrong for you, get that figured out. Right. Go to a therapist, go to your priest, go do whatever work mentally and spiritually you need to do to get over that so you can find somebody else who's going to treat you right.
Right. And that's why I think it's funny that you say we look a little differently at this, because I think we're saying the same thing, but just in 2 different ways. Because I say that you're never going to be happy with your partner unless you find fulfillment and happiness in yourself. And so if you're going to get a divorce, then you moving on to somebody else is not going to be fulfillment for you. In fact, it's just going to bring a whole nother set of problems, which is why second divorce, third divorce, fifth, are so much higher.
Yeah, because you haven't fixed your own stuff.
You haven't fixed your own stuff. And so if you're in my office and a divorce is happening, my thing is I'm going to tell you, like, hey, this is the time to figure out what you need and how you can become a whole person. And I always say, use the divorce as an opportunity to launch yourself to become this better version that you never thought you could be. Because sometimes we just get in a marriage and we're just stuck. And we just are doing the day to day and we stop realizing what I need. We want to be, we don't want to be selfish. We do so much for our spouse, for our friends, for our kids. And then we forget what we need. And I know you specifically have some things that you need personally to feel fulfilled and joy. And when you're not getting that, it just, it kind of puts you on a path of feeling less than. And so, hey, if you're in a divorce, you're right. It's not greener on the other side. But if this is what's going to happen, let's turn it around and make it a positive experience for you to become this better version, this better person. And then if you end up marrying somebody else, you're going to be in a much better position to be able to handle whatever trials come with the marriage.
Yeah.
So Marco, thank you so much for being on my podcast. It was just an honor. I love being your friend. I love seeing all the amazing things you are doing to help people. And I really want people to know where they can find you. So tell them.
So if you are on TikTok, I still can't believe I'm on that place, but if you're on TikTok, it's @divorceattorney. And then I'm not great on the other socials. I don't play that game terribly well. But if you want to find us and the things we write about divorce, it's www.utdivorceattorney.com. 400,000 words of content on there. You can get our FAQs on there. Anything you need. I try to give away as much stuff as possible. And it's not just for people of Utah, and like anybody can come in and read these articles and get something from it. So those two things primarily. If you need to come into the office and talk to me about your divorce, it's 801-685-9999.
Yep. Thanks, Marco. Appreciate it. If you're interested, no one dies from divorce. We're really excited. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jill. It was great.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoil.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.